Well, it's definitely polarising the Manx public. It's a very big subject, of course, about the right to die, which has had its first reading in Tynwald. Bill's here from representing a group of churches as well. Obviously, your side is definitely not to have this at all, is it? I mean, is there no way, Jose, at all, or is there any compromise on this whole thing?
Well, yeah, I just think that the what's being proposed is something that's really dangerous, and there's maybe a little bit more to it than we initially thought with what was proposed to start with to Tynwald, because it was.
I mean, this is 6 months to end of life, isn't it? To have that right to go.
Yes, that's
what they're proposing.
That's still what's proposing. But I think what's come in that's extra and maybe wasn't what was originally expected is that there are two aspects to it. There's assisted suicide. So
you're using the suicide term here.
I am
that's
using
very
the
emotive,
suicide term. Yeah, and I appreciate that. Although I noticed that when you had Trevor Moore from My Death, My Decision, he will use that phrase as well. Okay. But assisted suicide in the sense of providing drugs to enable someone to end their life. But the thing that's added in is euthanasia, or Dr Allison would probably say voluntary euthanasia, where the medical professional will directly administer the drugs. And yeah, that's certainly something that I would see as massively dangerous in all sorts of ways.
Okay. So people shouldn't have the right to do this at all. They literally have to terminate, naturally, and that's the end of it. I mean, that's your side of this.
Yeah, I mean, I think the reality is there are already a lot of rights that people have, and there are various nuances to the law that you can look at. But I mean, one of my big concerns is when you look at the other jurisdictions where this has happened, where assisted dying legislation.
I mean, Switzerland seems to be the leader, right?
Yeah, I mean, Switzerland's a little bit of an outlier because they operate outside of a medical model. Every other jurisdiction, it's been really quite.
But you do have to have doctors sign off on it. I mean, it's not like you just turn up there and be killed. I mean,
yeah.
There's got to be some.
You have to have doctors
end of
sign
life
off.
Sort of
Yeah. But then you just see the impact of, it was. Who was it? I think it was Lord Sumption. He was a Supreme Court justice, and he said that the laws are at their safest when they lie along natural boundaries. So when this bill brings in the idea of you got 6 months to live and a terminal illness, that at first seems like quite a tight restriction. But you see in every other jurisdiction you've seen a stretching of that law, and I think that's not actually surprising, because where you move away from the natural boundary line, where else do you draw it? And the 6 months stroke terminal becomes fairly arbitrary, which is why you see in Canada, within the time it takes for a child to go through primary school, you see you've seen a move from euthanasia, which is their main thing. It's mostly voluntary euthanasia in Canada, where it's been for people with terminal illness and unbearable pain, and it's now getting, by next year it will be basically euthanasia for sad
So
people.
you think give an inch, they'll take a mile?
Well, I think, in a sense, but I think it's a natural process, and you see it as well in Netherlands, where they're now offering euthanasia for dementia. You're seeing it in Belgium, where they're offering it for things like PTSD and depression. And it's like, where does the natural boundary lie on this? And then the dangers that brings for vulnerable people in all sorts of ways.
First reading done. So what can you do now? I mean, it's underway basically. What sort of pressure are you going to be able to put upon people, the MH case?
Sure. I know there are various people in various groups that are involved in this and are communicating in different ways with their MHKs, and I guess I would certainly want to encourage our MHKs to look long and hard at this, and to encourage the Manx public to look long and hard at this, and to look at things like the pressure that can come on people. So I was reading some research recently that said that 1 in 5 elderly people in the UK suffer from some sort of abuse, be that psychological abuse or financial or sexual or physical neglect. And we don't have figures for that in the Isle of Man, but if you kind of transposed it onto the same sized elderly population in the Isle of Man, you'd be looking at something like 4,000 people. And then you bring alongside a bill that allows assisted dying, and you take, for example, the fact that nursing home costs in the island, I mean, they've just been going up and up. 50k, some are now north of 60,000 per year for nursing home costs, and you can see that for a certain group of people, you can see where the pressure would come on their parents, and okay, most people are decent, ordinary people. There are some who are not, but even
that's always going to be the case.
Always going to be the case, and that's why the law needs to protect.
But quality of life. I mean, my own experience. My mother, went almost but didn't, and then lived on a year. I say lived in just a vegetated state, and I thought it was quite horrible to watch. And the nursing home clearly wished that she would also just want to go. But I think I think people can cling on, but the quality of life is zero in Wales, isn't it?
Yeah, and I've certainly seen a lot of that, and there's a strange dynamic there of people who kind of want to go and don't. I personally believe that a person's will to go on living can
I think you go to the cliff and look over, and then decide you don't want to do it, maybe. But quality of life is such a thing. Isn't it a person's personal choice? If they make the right provisions, they do it. I mean, you can still call it suicide. People can do, and there's been well documented big cases, but in couples do it together, and they make all the provisions and leave notes outside and don't disturb us, and that's surely a personal thing. That's termed suicide, isn't it? Which is again very emotive that we talked about.
Yeah, absolutely, and I can see the power of that, and that's what feels almost like a no-brainer to lots of people. It's ultimately it's my body, it's my decision, isn't it? And if I'm going to be suffering, then why can't I? But I think we need to be aware of the effects of that autonomy, and I think there's a couple of things with that. So firstly, no person is an island, and if we introduce this legislation, it creates dangers for people who are in all sorts of vulnerable situations. But then also, I think when we look at what's happened in other countries, I actually think that, and this might seem kind of almost counter-logical, but I think that we are in danger of people losing autonomy if we go for this legislation. So we find that that people who think who are making an autonomous choice, but the principle that undergirds autonomy in our society is the principle of the value and dignity of each human life as an autonomous agent, and that's also the principle that underlines not taking people's lives, and when we start to erode that, when we start to rub out that line in the sand, you see all sorts of unintended consequences. So I think of a lady called Christine Gauthier in Canada, Paralympic athlete, and she was looking for funding for a wheelchair, and was told, no, we don't have the money for that funding, but if you're suffering, we can offer you as Canada call it, medical assistance in dying, which she wasn't asking for, but the danger of that kind of eroding autonomy. In Netherlands, there's been some scary cases documented of a lady called Marguerite who was euthanized purely for pneumonia. Something that hit the press recently.
But there's always going to be those things.
But the thing is that when you introduce that sort of legislation, the dangers.
We have the Dr Shipman thing hanging over us, because in the old days doctors could just give a little bit of a nudge, maybe.
Yeah.
Say, that's now completely, no. The Liverpool pathway, that was proved not correct either. So hospice is probably where most people spend their last few days if they're terminal, I gather. Would that be right to say that? Or at home, maybe with family and friends, but they know they're going to go. It's just a question of when.
Absolutely, and I think that's such a gem that we have. I mean, partly in the British Isles, where hospice care is far higher than anywhere else in the world, and then on the island, the new hospice director, when he came in, the new hospice CEO pointed out, just the how valued our hospice is, and how high a standard it has. And if you're in the hospice and you spend time in there and you see the way that people are cared for, because it's they talk about this concept of total pain, where a person's suffering is not just about physical, but it's also about psychological and social and spiritual factors, and they look to address all of these and have this excellence in really very nuanced and carefully worked through pain management. I was reading something recently that 99% of people in Britain don't die with unresolved suffering, and of course this bill is pushing into what about the 1%? And I think so much of that then is about how do we fund hospice and palliative care to ensure that everybody who needs access to that end of life care can get it, because otherwise we're kind of saying, well, we can't fund you to live well until you die, but we can fund you to die, and I think that just feels the wrong way around.
Well, I'm glad to balance it up, and it's interesting to see where this debate will end up and what compromises that still may be made as it goes through its travels in Tynwald. Do you have a website or somewhere people, if they want to get in touch with you or show support, do you have a sort of go-to place?
Yeah, there's a Facebook page, which is Facebook.com. I'm trying to remember what it is now.
We'll look it up if you want. We can put it on the screen. Would that be better?
Yeah. We'll do that.
By magic, we'll get it and we'll put it on the screen. So that's
I think it's Facebook.com/Assisted Dying IOM, Assisted Dying Concern.
Okay, we'll get that.
But we'll get that up. Yeah.
Thank you very much. And when's it likely to? Do we know what the time scale of this is at the minute?
Well, obviously we're in the summer recess now, so
you think it'll be next? It should be next year.
I believe Dr Allison indicated that he would be looking for it to come in the autumn. Yeah. So obviously Tynwald's back in October. And
I think we should point out there's other checks and balances. I assume that you can't be doing tourism on this like Switzerland. It has to be a Manx person living on the Isle of Man, I guess. There's all those sorts of checks and balances. You can't just open the borders to people coming in, right?
Yes, but you only need to have lived on the island for a year. So, it does open up the potential of somebody thinking, I'll come over here and I will be able to end my life, and of course bringing their complex health needs for that intervening period.
And if the UK go, I don't know whether the UK is up on this, it's certainly being talked about. If they went, then it would probably be natural that we would follow, I suppose, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, certainly there's pressure and groups like My Death, My Decision, Dignity and Dying.
The Isle of Man's ahead of the curve
pushing that. Well, Jersey is also looking at this, and Scotland there's a move as well. Nothing currently in Westminster, but it comes up every few years, and of course it came up before my time in the islands. But Quentin Gill brought in.
Yes, that's right. I forgot about
brought in something. When would that have been? 2005 or something.
Yeah. Oh, well, the debate goes on, and we'll be following it.